Do you want to know how 2900 rated players play Bullet? Here. I was playing black, and my opponent played here. He's 2948. I was 2775. So I played here. I told him, show me what you got, sir. And he played here, and I played here. So this is, if I play h6, you do have to play a6, so the other pawn does not get upset. So we played here, c6. So this actually feels like it's Caro, maybe. Just defying c6 and d5, so it's Caro, some kind of a Caro, I guess. And I played it to d4, knight f6 here, and then he played this move. So here you could consider taking, but I think it's this is probably logical move. So it's like really the Caro-Kann kind of structure in a lot of ways. So knight c3. Actually, I was looking at this move, so I could still play like some kind of b5 in these kind of situations. You could also do rook e7, but b5 was actually my intention. Should he play queen b3? So knight c3, and then here you look at this kind of stuff. This is rock solid kind of play. Once I reached to this situation, I was like happy because this is not easy to crack. So here queen b3 actually happened here. So I went with the original idea that I have is b5. So you do have to react. I mean, you cannot play e3, for example, because I could take this pawn. So he did take, and you do have to take the right way. I mean, this is probably more logical for me. Because if you could take this way, it's possible to take that way. It just feels like maybe c6 is not, it's like a weak pawn, perhaps. Sometimes you could take that way, but I figured that, why not take the other way, and we could claim that we have some rook activity sometime next year if I'm able to get rook c8. So I played e4. I'm not so convinced by this move. You're not supposed to go backwards. You're supposed to go in front. You might say this is really active move, e4. I'm going in front, but the issue is I do this, so your knight has to go backwards. You cannot go here, you cannot go there, you cannot go there. You may have to go back here or here, which is not good moves, right? So he went over here, and so the knight is not active. It's threatening to take the pawn, but we just play here. And obviously he went this way, which is logical move to me, because here he could play rook c1 or, any kind of rook c1 and somehow get to the square. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna play here. So my goal here in this kind of position is to play bishop e7 and castle. I've been trying to castle for a while now, so I guess here and this kind of idea is logical way to play. So he played here, rook c8. I didn't feel comfortable giving him this rook move, and then he may get the other rook involved too. So there's no need for that. I was like, no sir, we just trade now. So he took, and I know that rook c1 is coming. The real question is which square? There's two choices here. Was there queen e6 and queen e8? I don't know if I spent some time here. I instantly played this move, but I don't know. Queen e6 may not be the best move. You're not really taking that pawn. You do have to be concerned about rook c8. So maybe this move is okay. I mean, sometimes you could play this kind of stuff. The idea is here, bishop e7, castle, just like we mentioned, and then rook c8. So it doesn't matter if the queen is on here or here. So I figured that it's okay. So he played here and then bishop e7. So the ultimate goal is coming up, just castling short, coming, and then he took and took. Now, he played this move. I'm not really a big fan of this move. Now, if he has the two rooks, doubling up may make sense in a lot of ways. The real issue, sometimes people tell you the rook in 7th rank is always good. That's true, but if it's going to stay, if it's going to stay for the next 20 years, it's fine, right? Or if it's going to attack something or win something, that's also fine. The problem is here, my plan is not to castle because, I know I wanted to castle for a long time. I cannot castle now because he just takes a knight. And that was his idea, like rook c7, you cannot castle, right? But the problem is here, I could do this. I could tell him, just go back to c1 again, sir. You're not going to stay on c7. And he had to go back all the way. So you cannot go rook c6, rook here. They are all takeable. right? Rook c2, takeable. So he has to go all the way back. So if you notice, this felt like it's a waste of move. Black gain a move, if you think about it. I gain a move on d8, even though it's, back rank. But he lost a turn. And it's now black to move. Whether I could also play like castle, and then the bishop could maybe move. I don't know, but it just feels like it's a waste of move just to play rook c7 and then have to go back to c1. But anyways, it's we went for this one, and then I castled. It took some years, but we were eventually able to do it. So he went backwards. So there's one problem here with white, is this knight is sitting on e2. And I have news. The rook may have to move again. I mean, feels like it's a mysterious rook moves. Rook c7, rook c1, and then he's going to move again. And that's actually the problem, is this knight. Remember we talked about how he played e4 and allowed me to play here. The knight is not active, right? And it's not finding ways, not finding a good square to go to. So maybe this is the idea, is to play knight b3 or knight d3 later on. So I played rook e8. This is actually, I was expecting this move in some line. This is also like a waiting move to see what kind of plans he's coming up. So he played rook e1. I had to laugh when he played this because I knew what's going on. I actually figured that the best idea by white, like this kind of idea, and then maybe like knight e5, or keep an eye on, like when the knight on d3, you're keeping an eye on these two squares. You're not going to knight c5 right away, but it's just keeping your options open to have the knight on d3. You're eyeing this one and this one, same time. But I played bishop e7. Yes, it's not a wasted move or anything, but I just needed to get the rook on c8. So now you look at this. I mean, black now is claiming activity. The rook was on e8, now it's c8. The rook was on c7, now it's on e1. It's fascinating stuff. So you have again, knight d3 is a logical move, but he played something that is not good. This move, and it's actually terrible. He may be looking at rook c1 for the 20th time, right? And also want to do knight c5. He's keeping an eye on a5, but the queen is has been sitting there for years. So I mean, I'm guarding the pawn. The problem with this move is bishop c2. This is the knight, the great knight that was on e2 and c1 and knight b3 and the big jumps that he's trying to claim, and then he loses a knight. I mean, the idea is you play here, I take, you do this, I take. You do this, I take. I mean, there's no way out of this. I could take. It's by forced, unless you want to lose your queen, right? You move the knight, you lose your queen. So the fun part is I did not play. I mean, 2700 rated player not seeing this, and the 2948 not seeing it. So that's part of the bullet, games. But anyways, I did not see it. I played here instead. I mean, bishop c2 by far was best, but I played here. Maybe I was eyeing knight c4. I was, knight e4. Also keeping an eye on this kind of stuff. So, I don't have queen c6 because I know that knight takes on e5. But I'm keeping an eye here at knight c4. And then this, perhaps, rook c2. I saw rook c2 a long time ago, but did not see bishop c2. But anyways, he played here. It's like a passive city again. So this is passive because I had bishop c2 again. Like it almost feels like this move is not playable by me. And it's easy and obvious. And here you still win the knight. But I did not take the knight. So I played here. And it's funny that this move is being played because he could take here. He went here instead. So it's funny that you could still do this because you might say, well, maybe you could play queen c2. But he takes a pawn. And then the fun part is once you take a pawn, this becomes an outsider pass pawn, right? This pawn, like, it's a passer. So it didn't make sense to me, like, queen c6 is not really a move. But anyways, here, he played this move instead, which is shocking for me because I could win a pawn. And he gets the two bishops activity, but so what? I figured that here, queen c6. Again, I'm not going to c2. Something with c2 in this game is not playable. Like the queen could go here and not playing it, bishop c2 and not playing it. Anyways, I played here and bishop here and then f6. So maybe e5. I just have to be careful about how weak this pawn is, but I figured that, maybe restrict this bishop. I don't know if e5 is playable anyway. I mean, it's not at this point. If it's black to move, you play here, you just takes, and you just take on d5. Preparing it. Maybe I'm preparing to play e5 by, protect d5. So he played here. I mean, this is funny move because e5 is not playable at this point. But anyways, he played it, and then I played here. So this actually might be a good move by me because the knight could go here. So that's going to be like a better knight than a bishop. And if he takes here, his queen takes. So he played this move, and it's wicked strange because now the knight is really strong. All I have to do is play queen c2, and the bishop is being outplayed. Like it's being restricted by, by its own pawns, and like it can't go here, and everything is not that great for him. So I played here, and guess what? We played queen c2. I discovered that c2 is a square to jump to. It took like 57 years to do this, but eventually I'm able to play queen c2. I mean, I was happy about this one. But rook e1, maybe he had to take, but it's very passive game. I mean, if he take, is very passive anyway. The rook on the active 7th rank. Now that makes a lot of sense with this situation. The problem here when you play rook e1, which is logical, you might say, because, you take. I defend. The only issue is I had queen takes c4. And that becomes a pass pawn. I could create a pass pawn easily. And also the rook goes to c2. So it's like it's not that great for white. But I did not take. I played queen b3 with the idea of not taking. I mean, I'm not seeing the pawns, not seeing c2. I was so determined to play rook c2. That's the point. But then he has this move. This is probably the best active move throughout the game, and I actually call these moves like a counterplay. And should you give a counterplay like this, you do have to be careful because this could be the difference between a draw or a win. Sometimes. I mean, I may have to do this kind of stuff for queen c2 just to defend the rook, but I forgot that e6 is hanging. So by the time I played here, which I was confident, forgot about this. And then this is hanging. So the game is completely went from like black was so active to black lost a piece, pretty much. But I did not give up. I told myself, well, maybe we could create something. So this move is interesting. This position is actually lost, but there's ways to go wrong. So this move is actually interesting. Why? Because I'm attacking here, and the bishop cannot move, by the way, because this, I could take the queen. But this move is more into attacking this, and then the next move. So rook c2, this c2 square is really the core of this game. So rook c2, now you're looking at mate here or mate there. So obviously he could defend. Actually, during the game, I was like, could he defend? Because if you don't have a check here, it's game. Black wins. But he does have a check, which he discovered. This is actually forced. If you play queen d8, you lose, because I could just simply go here. There's no more checks, and then you cannot defend g2 or h2. So, but this check is perfect because I go here, and then he takes, and then he's defending. There's only one way to defend. This way. You cannot play queen f3 because you still get mated. So queen h1 is the only move left to defend both ideas, the h2 and g2. Now, the fun part here is, black's still losing, but white has to play passively for some time. So this is one interesting part about this. Like sometimes when you're up something, you have to defend, and you could also play passive. Like, passive in chess is really not key. But sometimes all you have to do is play passively just to defend. So queen h1, just like it's passive square. And I think computers were giving me like h4 or something from here. Try to expand the pawn and then push a little bit. And then eventually, the piece would perform, right? Like I guess here, and then you get the bishop activated that way. But we have a shock move here. I played queen e2 just to keep everything in, like waiting move. I'm still keeping my eye on here. But we have a shocking move here. So I think it's h4 still. Maybe it's h4, h5, and then maybe expand somehow. But you could easily go wrong. You could go wrong here because if obviously white is being tied down, but it's just computer was giving me it's a win anyway. It just feels like here white has to be have a little bit of like a little bit of precision to play. I mean, maybe he has to move the rook. You cannot also move the rook, by the way, because if you move the rook, you just get made on here. There's also e4. I mean, maybe e4 is also like maybe good enough. So I think e4 was, if I remember, like it's good enough because maybe e4 and bishop f2 would be simply the defense maybe, and then the queen could get out. So you could use this passive square on f2, and you still up a piece, right? To deal with this kind of stuff. But we have a shocking move. We have this instead. So actually, if we go back a little bit, g4 would have been okay, I think. Let's say I play a random move, like something like here, and then g4. Maybe this is playable, and then if here, I guess he could still, maybe this h3. So you could play like that. And then eventually, he's likely to still win the game. But we have g4 from after e2. And then, so I went a little bit too fast here. It's checkmate because he has to block with the queen, and then I win. So the takeaway in this game, it's entertaining game because how many times did I miss queen to, bishop c2 to take the knight, and how many times did I land on, that I did not take on e4. So that's a mysterious game with a lot of things happening, and even at the very end, it was funny. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video and stay tuned for more entertaining stuff.